Marvelous. Let me just get these set up correct. Hello.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome to Test in Production. Thank you so much for joining us. Today is April 16th, 2020. Our guest today is Oren Rubin, CEO and founder of testim.io. Hello, Rubin. Thank you. Oren, thank you for joining us.
Hello, my friend. Happy to be here.
Thank you. You are going to be showing us how AI and machine learning can dramatically improve test automation.
Oh, yeah.
Which I'm looking forward to hearing about. As you, those of us who are at LaunchDarkly, who follow LaunchDarkly or use it, we do all kinds of different testing, most notably A/B testing. But functional testing is rather different to that. So before we get started, can you tell us a little bit about functional testing?
Yes, sure, of course. There's different type of testing, right? There's someone can test the function. When you talk about the functionality, let's take a calculator. We want to make sure that the output is correct. It means if I do 1 + 1, the result will be 2. Different types of other testing is performance testing is does the answer 2 comes fast enough? What load testing is, what happens if I have 2,000 people doing it at the same time? How will that impact on that performance? There's accessibility. Can someone that has some wants to see it through some screen reader really understand where's the 1 and where's the 2, and then and get the result that 2 is shown? There's visual validation. So I want to make sure that number 2 is aligned to the right or to the line to the left. Are all the buttons aligned? Those are called visual validations.
Cool. So lots of different ways to make sure that this thing is working as designed and possibly even catching things that weren't explicitly designed.
Yes, like different aspects of the application.
Cool. So yeah, we do a fair amount of that at LaunchDarkly, and I believe you're going to go into things like the differences between different levels of testing, and especially what I'm looking forward to, dealing with some of the brittleness that can happen in browser test automation. So let me switch over to the slides view, and you can take it away.
Sure, awesome. I think that the first thing I want to make sure that everyone understands, and of course we talked about what is functional testing, but we want to talk and understand granularity. And the granularity means what exactly, what part of my application am I testing? Unit test is just the basic, the most smallest unit. And of course, I can test few units at the same time together and how they interact between each other. That's called integrations, test integration. And of course, end-to-end, it's called, it means I'm running everything at the same time. Sometimes people get that confused because when people think about end-to-end flow, sometimes they think about not just all the system, the back end, the front end, the servers, everything up and running, but they sometimes think about, oh, I want to do a user story from start to end. So some people call that end-to-end as well. It mainly means that the entire system is up and running, but sometimes, as I said, some people think that end-to-end means the entire user story. The user logs in, add to cart, but mostly at end-to-end is like everything out there. And the granularity actually gives you, there's good and bad in every pro and cons in every one of those approaches. The unit, it means there's a lot of units. That means you have to get a lot of coverage. You have to go over and basically every unit and write a test for it. So it takes a long time to have the full coverage, and also to have a lot of confidence, because you can be doing a place where 2 units work by themselves, but together they don't integrate well. And trying to think all the different types of integration between all different units is hard, especially if you're someone designing something well, then too many units know about each other. You have to check them together. So that makes it much harder. And end to end, it has on the one hand the pros is of course higher coverage. You can check Gmail, like sending an email, make sure you got it. That can take you write a test very easily. The same day you'll have 30% code coverage for Gmail. But on the other hand, it's slower. You don't know exactly what was wrong. Was it the back end? Was it the front end? So you need a lot more tools for root cause analysis. Um, but so people tend to actually to have a mix of both. I love showing the difference between unit tests, which is something can work great by itself, but you want to make it the whole. So if you Google unit test versus integration test, you'll see 100 of those and different types of example like those. And one last thing before we get started is like understanding where end-to-end actually work with your functional test. Where can you run it? People think you can only run it on before production, and then say, oh no, that's the QA, that's another team. But end-to-end test, there's no reason why not run it before production, of course, and after releasing the production. You can use that. Some people use that actually to synthetic monitoring to make sure you run it every minute, every 5 minutes on your production, just to make sure that you're all safe. That's in addition to all the APM tools. They even provide those capabilities of running end-to-end tests. And then again, they're slower, but it mimics more like a real users. One thing that I would note, you should note is if it's just your test, try to think about analytics and how you affect that in production. So how do you make sure that you can disable the analytics so it won't interfere with your real data? Because there's the other people that might depend on analytics to decide where you're going. So you want to make sure it doesn't affect that. So as I said, people run different tests and combinations. Sometimes they run it depends on the location, like on the timing. So on every commit, you do that, like you can do that 5 times an hour. So you want to have very short, fast tests. That's usually unit tests. You can do before you merge. You can do only test the front end side or only test the back end side, depending where your code is. You merge. You actually, as I said, you do some integration tests of several units. Either in the front end, you mock all the servers, or vice versa, you just check the server. But before releasing, you want to check with end-to-end, and sometimes even people want to check different browsers. So what people know and people hate about end-to-end test, and they think it's very slow to offer, and also that it's brittle and it's flaky and it breaks all the time. So those are 2 things that I want to focus on right now and show you where AI can make a difference. I'll start with before I even start, I just want to say I kind of try that when you ask me, hey, can you talk about AI? I try to slice it out for like 4 pieces of where we are today. What do you think we have right now? What's going to be over the next year? What's going to be in the next year? Like, what are the things what are the steps that you're going to be? Just like if you take the I don't know, the Tesla and autonomous cars. Well, before you had full autonomous cars and that get approved, you have already kind of like, it's not exactly self-driving cars, but it knows how to keep a lane, and it doesn't know how to stop when the traffic light is red, but there's some parts. So there is different levels, and that's what people try to do, especially now in the world of agile. So people do want to chunk it up into small, valuable pieces, and I do believe that machines can help us in different levels, and some they've already did. So when I talk about, let's separate this between UI interactions and validations. Especially, I'll just talk more about visual validation, even though there's different types of validation. I can validate that when I said I'm gonna use UI interaction to click 1+1. Now I want to validate that there's 2 is shown. I can validate the text. I can validate the network request. I can validate that the pixels are shown, the buttons are aligned. There's so many things I can validate. Today we'll focus more on the visual validations, show the challenges, and of course where AI comes in. So let's start with the user interactions. In order to show sometimes like how hard this is, I like to play a game. So is there anyone watching us now that's familiar with HTML, like basic HTML, or like developers out there? If you do, just raise your hand and let us know. It would be nice if you can guess. I'm going to show something that I want to perform. We'll take a very basic app, and I want to ask some questions like how do you choose when you want to automate pressing a button instead of a human? We all might want to automate our tests and to run automatically. So we want to have, oh, how can I find the play button? And it also explains, I think, throughout this why machines and doing that themselves and learning from humans without us instructing them how to do it, why is it harder? Um, so the basic way of us is actually coding right now. So, but coding means that you have someone, you have to know the app, you have to think, and why can a bot do that automatically for us? So until now, bots were kind of very simple, but you had to program it to decide which property to use. So everything, all the tools for test automation used to just have one property that you can choose, either whether via CSS selectors or XPath. They're basically very, very similar. They're both ways to query a graph. Um, but the properties that you have are usually in HTML. Those are like an ID, a class, text, whether there's a tag name or linking to somewhere. Those are the things that you can use. CSS select and XPath actually gives you the find something inside something, or but basically this is kind of like the attributes that you have. So what I like to say is, like, let's just say we always use the ID. Why is it that so simple? Like, if there's an ID, let's choose that. And that's my question, like, that I ask people. And if someone knows, just tell me. That would be great to hear your thoughts. Um, is there why when is using an ID, let's say that sounds ideal, like that's a unique identifier, why sometimes the next time I run it, it won't work? So if and I'll share a few of the things, like the reasons I've seen that it falls. The first reason is random generated ideas. Like, I didn't change anything. I said, okay, click on something that has an idea, and I look at the dev tools. I see the idea. I right click. I copy that. I put in my test, run it, and then I run the test, and it fails. So it could be that you have a reusable component. When you have two components, right, you can only have one ID. Um, they can't have that. So you have components that someone adds a random generated ideas. So that's the first reason that something can fail. There's a few more just for the idea, but it could be that if you go along and something fails after a week, it could be that someone just changed the code. Like, if you rely on one property, if someone changes that, then it will break the code, because um, the code, assuming that it has some property, it's kind of like a little bit of white testing, like white box testing. You're saying, I know it has some specific property. This is not exactly like a human does. A human doesn't check, oh, it has an idea, okay, I'll click this button. A human just clicks the button based on other things as well, based on the text or the location, etc., the image. So that's another thing that can happen. Someone changes the code, you fail. Um, Another thing that I saw was, actually, if you look at the DOM, you're saying, oh, it's the same ID, what can I find it? Sometimes there's a component inside of an iframe. So even finding an iframe, first you have to switch to the right iframe. A lot of people has things like cache killers, etc. So it's randomly generated over there, and those can break your test very, very easily, very easily. So you need, in order to find the iframe, that's again the same challenge. It doesn't depend on you. It's someone else's application at all. Like, you're embedded in someone else's application. Um, One of the weirdest things, not the weirdest, but close, is like, but I still see that the standards doesn't the standard says that you have to have one ID in a document, but a lot of people have more than one. I've seen that a lot. And they just copy paste something and they forget, and the browser don't enforce it. It doesn't not load the page because of that. The page still works. But most query engines just result. They said get element by ID. They return one, which is the first one. So in some places you'll see your page and you're like, why am I getting another element? What's going on? It could be that you have the same ID twice. I've seen that so many times. This is the weirdest thing I ever saw. There were a few frameworks that were actually generating, instead of like they want to do something on top of another, they had two bodies. The HTML had two bodies, and actually they put them in a random order. So sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't work. I was like, what? There's like one ID here, but why sometimes it doesn't work? And apparently it was looking at the first body. Always, all the tools looking at usually at the first body. So you want to make sure you don't have something weird like that. Those are the basic, like what can make an ID, even though you didn't change anything, your test will break. Two more, for examples, like why not class? They said, okay, don't use ID. You have a reusable component, you can use a class. But classes are for styling. That means they will change. That means that tomorrow people will make adjustment, and finding it based on just property of the styling. That means that tomorrow, if you change the image, it might look different. And this is where people start having, oh, I want the nth child, I want the third one, and those actually tend to break as well, because you're now relying on the third, and CSS selectors, well, until CSS4 standard comes out, they've been talking about for 3 years now. That you can find an element based on the content. Like, instead of the third, can I find it based on that it says Miami next to it, and then click on the image. So those things are not out yet. Some things you can do with XPath, but people really love, especially developers. They know CSS locators. They love that. So that's kind of like annoying as well. That you need why CSS classes also often break every time you change the design, and people change the UI all the time. That's the problem right now. Is that people are more agile. They want to release 5 times a day. All the other options, trust me on that, they're also super fragile. They all can tend to break. And I think the conclusion here is that a single property is as for us humans, like it's too fragile. But on the other hand, we can't say, hi, I want to look at 50 properties based on that. This is not something that humans could do, but this is something that that computers can actually do very, very easily. And I want to show something. So, and I think the first level, by the way, is using several locators, and not like several properties and not just one. And I'll try to use an example here. Let's first, we need a test here. And that's it. Spot it. Okay. So let's pick something randomly. Yeah, Yas, are you with me here?
Yep.
Oh, so I have a few questions for you, my friend.
Go for it.
So what I'm doing here, and I want to show something. I want to show how using multi-locator works, and but before that, I need to make a change to the application. The application is going to click this yellow button right here. I added a breakpoint in the middle. It's going to click the yellow button. What I want to do is change some of the properties so it's going to look different. So first, what's your favorite color?
Oh, let's go with red.
With red. Red is awesome. I like the fact that you're like thinking of, wait a second, what's my favorite color? It's like
This
we
is a
had
difficult question. I mean,
that's blue, no red.
No, blue. Ah!
Red is awesome. So we changed it, and we can also change. I'll pick my favorite color is pinkish. And I need some numbers. Can you give me a random number?
84.
Sorry?
84. Are we talking about
use the 4, but I can change the
between 1 and 10.
4. And I'll change one of the classes as well. There's a number here, so it's going to look different.
Nice.
what I did here is I changed, and I'm going to resume the test, so it's going to look for that yellow button there. Um, and what I wanted to show is and ask is like a human when something changes, we as human we can still find element. The question is how do we do this? And I want to just look and say if you look at all the properties that that element had, there's a lot of them. Like there's many of them. The fact that
Right.
we changed the text, the fact that we changed one of the classes and the location, that's very mild changes. So you can even do if you do a statistical analysis, and computers can do that super fast. Um, if you look at all the, of course, you can look at all the entire body and see all the different properties they have, and comparing what you saw earlier, the DOM application earlier a second ago, and the application now, you can say that in 74% match. So that means in this is the confidence that we think that this is the same element, even though they don't look exactly the same, um, which is which is great. It means in this case we still had that test that step passing. It means it says it's good enough. Of course, you want to have your own threshold. Um, but it means that even though you change things that what you think is usually are going to break your test, now those things will not break your test. Your test will not break and won't be so brittle. Um, Especially when you change things in A/B testing. If you and I hope that people are doing that. Um, Sometimes you make some changes to the application. You don't want to start now rewriting their entire test just because you made a small change to to the way things look. Um, but what I want to show is actually something else. Is like, what can you actually improve? What happens right now if you look at like computers, like they can do even more because they can put in weights on things and say, okay, this property is good or bad, and actually give it a score. And remember, we were talking about random generated IDs. So an ID is great, but if it changes all the time, then it's not. It doesn't help us. So, but if you look over, the more you run your tests, you can learn. Um, that could be a great help. So, and that's something that humans can't do. They can't look at every time you run a test and look at all millions of properties and make changes. Computers can do that very easily. So, if you have like 5 stars here for specifically for that element, if you do, let's say, with a manual improve right now, just say, oh, this is the element again. This is the same element. And so what you'll see is that now the score is actually lower. And that's because if something changes in 5 minutes, as it saw two different values, the score goes down. The confidence we have in that property not changing is lower. And of course, it's going to get lower and lower if it's a random generated idea. So that's the idea on multi-locators, and and I hope everyone can understood what I meant by this is something. The first level is to have multi-locators and to have more stable tests. Um, the second thing, what I've started to show you is like I showed the manual improve, but can you improve every time you run the test? If the test passes, it means, okay, that's great, it worked. Let's look what we can learn out of that. Um, and that's what I think is also that's the next step um, um, that can be happen, and I'll talk a bit on what I think is even the next step, something that we'll see this year, which is I call it autonomous testing, but I don't think it's fully autonomous. Like I fully autonomous will take more years when you give an application to an app and it will just test it for you and clicks randomly. I think those are how do you know that those button should be aligned or not should be aligned or the text should be this font. If you don't show it, then it's going to be harder for a computer. I think computers are not there to tell you if whether it's pretty or not better than you. So I think until there, those three levels, like 1, 2, and 3, still would need some human help out. The third level is I think is connecting to production. I've seen so many times where um, where someone wins testing and they're not aware of what's going on in production. So I think that connecting to production gives you so many things. One, you can automatically generate the tests, and there's no reason that you'll think about, oh, what's the test? You need to think about the bad path, not the happy paths. Happy paths, you'll have your users in production always running at. You should see what the users are doing, not only to generate the test, but to understand coverage. And I'm talking about user coverage, not just code coverage. Code coverage is a way to know how many lines of code have been written, but all lines are equal. And not all lines are equal, because the login can happen millions of times a day, and it's very critical for your business. Changing the profile image, it's not the most critical. If that doesn't work, if you have time to run 5 tests, I would recommend doing the login, the add to cart, the checkout, and the change profile image. Do it later. If you have time to run them both or authoring both, you should start with those which matter to the business first. This is what testing is. Testing is making sure that the product features that you set up are as expected, and of course, as expected means that it's the best thing for the business. Um, so, what I think would be is that you can, if you have something that you can look inside about what's going on in production, just like you have Google Analytics and think about other analytics, whether that's Mixpanel, Amplitude, etc. You want to know what's going on, what are the user flows that people are doing, and you can create those tests automatically. The fact that you're generating the test from viewing a lot of users actually means that it will be more stable, because if they have like a random generated ID, 2 different users might have different random ideas, and the machines can learn automatically and say, no, that property ID, I wouldn't use that for this case. It's different between different users, but the text is correct. So that's something that I think would be super, super helpful. And again, looking at all the information and millions of users within a day or two, and creating all the tests for you, that's something AI can help, and humans, sorry, we suck at that. So I hope that's more understood. Yours, by the way, any questions on, or anyone out there? If you have any questions, feel free not just to wait until the end. If you want to ask questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Yep, I'm keeping an eye on things, and we have some questions. I mean, I recommend carry on with the slides for the moment, and then we can field all the questions together at the end, if that works best.
Perfect.
Yeah.
So let's talk about. Sorry, I was going backward instead of forward. So visual validation again. To those who haven't been in the beginning, let's take something very, very simple. I can actually even show some examples of why a visual validation. Why is it something worth doing? When you're just, I'll start with the drawback. Actually, it's slower. You're taking the screenshot. You need to pass millions of pixels every time and comparing them. Them as opposed to just ask, oh, what's the text here? So looking, if we're looking here, we can see few flaws that usually won't be found in without visual validations. For example, that the image is in the back and not in. You see the Kawabanga, the image is in the back. That's something that's going to be harder to find without visual validations. When you take a screenshot, you can see that it's different. That's very easy. The size, I knew. I won't mention the name of the company, but it started with S and an A after that. And there's one more letter, but there was a bug that the entire application, instead of being the width of 100,024, that was a few years back. That was the resolution back then, but the entire application rendered as in 124. It's like very small, but all the tests passed. Because if you find using the DOM, all the tests passed. So size does matter apparently, after all. And another one last thing, that this is the the flying ponytail. I think that's the Google bug. They had, I think they had it only for production, only for administrator to show a flying pony going around and accidentally send it to everyone. Because when you're looking for a text and saying, hey, does it show Kawabanga? Yes, it shows it. But the question, it doesn't answer, do you have anything else shown there? So those are kind of like the reasons for doing visual validations. The reason that people don't do that a lot is not just because it's slower, but because it was very unstable. Why? Because people did just beat like pixel by pixel comparison, and those tend to break a lot. Like if you look at this, I'm trying to go between those two images. So anti-aliasing, every display adapter has something different. Sometimes some of them are actually not deterministic. So it's funny, but they are not deterministic. And that means if you render on the same device, same machine, you didn't change the app, you'll just render it again, and you'll see different results. So, and then people start with, and for the last 20 years started, oh, wait a second, can I put a threshold and not more than 10% change? And then those you can get false positives. Like that means that you can have, if you do that, a plus can turn into a minus, and that's because you're using the visual validation as also as functional. You want to make sure if you take a screenshot, it says that if you do a calculated 1 + 1, you take a screenshot, it says that the number 2 is shown. It also says that it's on the right in the same font, but it also does the functional testing. So so you can't have it too loose. So there's a lot of things that happen. This is this real examples that we've seen that actually fail. There's a few others that cause fails to test to fail. And I think that first level, of course, is very similar. This is where I think they can help you build. Okay, instead of doing a lot of validations, take a screenshot once and that's it. And of course, if you have things which has the random date, add an ignore region for that specific. But I think what AI helps is actually an understanding what a human would say. Would a human say that this change is mild or unnoticeable, or would it say no? This a human would fail it, and that's the nice thing that this is where we are even right now. That there's things that can help you with reducing those flackiness. The next level is can you look across tests? Like if you're moving your logo from the left corner to the right corner, will it fail one test? Because in some cases it will fail 1,000 tests. So the question is, do you want it to fail 1,000 tests, but tell you, look, I've looked at it. The computer can look at it and says it's one issue. It's the same issue. The login, the logo the logo thumbnail, it should be on the left. Now it's on the right. One issue, and the maintenance will not be. It won't take you 2 days to go over that. It will take you 5 seconds. Say, yeah, it's by design. It's not a bug. The designer decided and approved that, and you'll learn out of that. So looking across is just like with the same thing. And of course, as I said earlier, with finding elements, it's like you can understand that over there. You can understand that there's a lot of tests failing, but they all failed for the same place that an element wasn't available or clicked. So the same thing here can be done in level 2 here. So those would be great. I think that next level, of course, is more based on can we take what's going on in production and can generate the way we think that they should look. And by the way, when I say production, it doesn't have to be always production. It could be like some people playing around with it locally, and because as a developer, you won't even pass it along before you even play with it yourself. So you can play with it yourself just a bit, but there could be something recording what you're doing and creating an automated test out of that. And you can add those type of visual validation. You probably want to play around with different resolution, etc. It can learn and help create the test for you. You can also update it and of course give you coverage of whether that scenario was checked or not. So those were, I think, those are the two that we said we'll focus on today, finding elements and actually then validating. There's a few others, and I guess in every aspect, not just the end-to-end unit test. Can we create a unit test automatically from production? I think AI can help them in different areas, about risk management. We talked about that, but it wasn't a big focus. I think the key focus that I want to give here today is that AI can and will improve more and more and more your test, your authoring, how fast you author, and how stable the tests are. It can help you validate better than ever. And of course, where we see it is the connection to production. If you are doing this right now, even writing the test manually, like coding them, use Google Analytics or Mixpanel, or whatever you're using to get write the correct test. But and also then run it, use it as your monitor, and monitor your critical flows there in productions. That were my critical through things that I would recommend people doing. Thank you, everyone.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Oren. That was hugely informative. Thank you. So we have, we're going to take some questions from the audience now, and we already have some. And if you're watching on the Twitch stream and you have questions or comments about test automation, about anything that Oren mentioned here, then please post in the chat. We'll be taking them for the next 25 minutes or so. So to start with, before I get to some of the questions that we've already got a bunch of questions from the chat. But first of all, before I get to that, I just want to ask, we probably have some people watching who are very interested in automating end-to-end tests to improve the quality of their apps, but they haven't really set up much of anything yet. So where's the best way, or how is the best way to start to get the best bang for the buck?
Do you mean whether to start with end-to-end or with unit test or integration test?
Any of that, yeah. I mean, let's say you've got I think this has happened to many of us who do web development, is that we have something that was a spike or a side project or something that we were just trying to get as fast as possible and didn't really bother with the tests, and now we've got something working that we have to maintain and going, oh God, I need test coverage on this.
So my recommendation is to go top bottom. That means start with the end-to-end test, so you'll have biggest coverage as soon as possible, because you want to have, if you don't have automation, and automation that you trust, then that means you have to test everything manually, and we all know that people have bugs, so we all know that we need that safety net. And the more you add, I would add later the integrations, like just testing the front end or the back end, and if you didn't write unit tests, then write the unit test, and that would give you, when something fails, you'll know, okay, I know that this unit doesn't work and this function failed. End-to-end wouldn't give you to you that right now. I think in the future it will, but I think you need a high coverage as soon as possible, and then you want to have the safety net as soon as possible, and then you want to have the drill down, and when something fails, you're making a small change, you want to know exactly what failed.
Right. So end-to-end is the fastest way to get, just broad coverage that your happy path works.
Yes.
And you can do that, I suppose, as you were demonstrating with the test recorder. Is one of the easiest ways to do it. Just kind of click through the way you normally use the app.
I think what changed now is AI. I think test recorders back then, a couple of years back, were so bad. I was personally, everyone knew me as the person that hated that and said, never use that, always code your test. And they now was like, oh, and you've changed. And now I think they're stable. I think they're more stable than what a human would do. So it doesn't just save you time, they're more stable.
Yeah, I definitely remember, 10 years ago using the Selenium test recorder and hand editing everything that it did. And it took a lot of work. As saying this stuff can be useful but incredibly brittle. And so but you're talking also that then once you've got some end-to-end coverage, you want to go deeper into unit tests and component tests and things like that. We have one of the some of the questions we've been getting from the chat. Johnny Five is alive. Apparently a short circuit fan. Is basically saying, where do unit tests and component tests fit in here? So where do you think the value is there?
The value, I do think that in the future, AI can help with even unit tests. Because if you look at a flow, like right now we're talking about UI from UI testing. It means you click on something, and you're validating the expectations later. But actually, when you think about it, when you click on something, there's a function being called, and another function or method like inside, whether that's the client or the server, they are being called with some values, and you get a response later. And in most cases, you get is a function that returns some value. So even if you look at that and you see a lot of examples created out of that, you can create, maybe in the future, we'll see that unit tests will be created automatically just by using your app once. So I know there's people like who likes TDD, and actually that means that you write the test first and then you implement based on that. That's great. I'm not saying to not do that, by the way, just making sure. Just saying if you don't, for whatever reason there is, there's no reason that you wouldn't like to have unit tests later, but it's, of course, it's going to take you a long time to do it later. If you don't do it while you're building it all the time, then it will be huge and it will take you months. So if AI can help you with generating those unit tests, I think that would be great.
But would you say that it's still worth? I mean, let's say at the moment we don't have AI for generating unit tests. How would you say it fits in at the moment in terms of, let's say you've got some end-to-end tests. Is it still worth putting some effort into having, say, component tests?
Yes, I really believe that you should have end-to-end. They're more and unit tests, they're more complementary. Everyone helps in a different aspect. Anyone can be used by others. For example, your end-to-end test, maybe the manual testers can use that and help out writing more tests. Unit tests, for example, I think that less. Yeah, that would be probably the developer themselves writing and owning that component and adding all the tests for that specific component. Or I think you need both.
Right. Yeah, it's certainly been useful for me when doing testing, because unit tests and component tests tend to be much faster than end-to-end tests.
So that's why I think.
So if you're able.
No, sorry. But I think I agree with you 100%. And I'll go back just to say that I think that the unit tests, you'd run them in a different times. Like
Right.
on every commit, you can run it. It takes seconds, so let's run it. And the end-to-end testing, because they're slow, it's something as much as slower as something, you're going to run it in a later stage.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something I find incredibly useful is getting validation as fast as possible. You really want that, as they call it, the inner loop of development to be as fast and tight as possible. And also unit tests make for good documentation on themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They're good for describing what a function is actually meant to be doing.
Exactly. But you can still do it. I just want to put one note there for everyone.
Yeah.
When you write unit tests, still use it as a black box. Don't look inside of the implementation. If there's a function called add and gets 2 integers and returns another one, don't check that there's an internal state in the application somehow, or just because you can change the implementation, but the unit should still do the same thing.
Yeah, you're testing the interface, the external interface and external behavior of the component.
Yeah,
that's a really good point.
Can I give one more point?
Yes, please.
And also even API testing, like if you have component, like let's just say microservices, um, the fact that one service has tests for it, their own, let's just say a service that has their API tests, um, other components using, or other services using that component or that service, they should have their own tests of what do they think, what is the contract between them, what did they assume. So if the fact that the
Oh,
service,
right.
the original service has their own unit test or their own test, the ones using that can say, no, 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 this is my contract the way I think it is. And then when they change, when someone changes a service, and they're in their tests as well, because it goes together, it's the same place, you change that, you want to run the test of people that are dependent on you and how they see the contract, and that contract is still fulfilled.
So would this be by using like mocks and spies? So you mock in something to act as the component being used, and you want to make sure that it's receiving the method calls that it should be receiving.
Um, I'll give an example which I just saw a friend uses, and I like the example. He was giving a friend from Hi-Res, he was showing an example on Angular, and told, okay, there's a third-party library that you're using. I don't know, I think he used something for dates. And um, and then he said, okay, me, when I'm running my test, let's write an adapter, first of all, like that's the interface between my application and like the date, whether I'm using Moment.js or another library. There's an API which I want to work with. And when I have that API that I want to work with, I can test my tests, my own tests with that it could be mocked. I don't care because at that point, if
Mm-hmm.
this is the API, I can mock that. But on the other hand, I can run additional tests, which would it takes the library by itself and add and write tests for it. So that means that even if Moment.js changes something that breaks, that they obviously when they change something, they'll change their tests and it will work great. But now if you've updated and you have the new version of Moment.js, but it doesn't find it breaks your contract, how you think use it, how to use it, then you want to know about it, and of course you want to have your own test that breaks because of that.
Right, right. So yeah, that's very useful, especially for catching issues with third-party dependencies before they bite you. I mean, many of us have been in the situation of, casually updating a third-party library because, there's a new release and suddenly stuff gets broken and you don't realize
Exactly.
until you deploy.
Exactly. And especially in unit tests, you wouldn't catch that because when you're doing unit tests, you're not
Mm,
testing the moment, you're not checking the external library. When you do end-to-end testing, you will catch that. So
right.
so the question is, do you want to have two different types of unit tests, one that checks the external library, one that checks you, and the contract between them? Or do you want to have an end-to-end? My answer, I think you should have a bit of both.
Right. So they had a couple of questions about the semantics of testing. So, for example, Heidi was talking about when you were demonstrating how uh, how you can get the right element, using AI to do a statistical analysis effectively on uh, on the different components. She said it's like you're testing with the gestalt rather than the specifics of the element. In other words, and Heidi, please correct me if I'm wrong on this one, but so effectively, what the component is actually for, or what you're trying to find a way to describe um, the semantic meaning of the component that you're looking for. And the way that AI is doing is statistically, but I suppose this really comes in when you're talking about like TDD, in terms of how do you, and maybe it's two different things. Please tell me, but how do you locate something that doesn't exist yet
Mm-hmm.
when you're writing the test?
So let me explain. There's TDD and BDD. So let's talk about first of all the kind of like the differences, a bit of the difference.
Hmm.
And I can even show.
Yes,
First of
please.
all, it's something that you might want is one level, an abstraction layer. at a business level. Clicking on stuff and user interactions, those are the implementation level. You do want to have both layers in a test. This is not a good test. A good test is if I select those steps here and let's group them all together and say this is the login, and select the other steps and say, and again I'll do it. I can extract the function and say this is search. So this is the business level. This is we're doing a login and a search, um, and we should focus, of course. A test should be written, and we didn't focus on that too much today. About in a test of the should be different levels. So if you're familiar, things like I don't know cucumbers that actually forces you to work like that. First of all, to write the high level implement, and then of course inside what is the implementation inside of it? How do you implement the login? And there's another thing which is something like also page object kind of like forces you as well. Page object focus more. It's a design pattern that focus more on inheritance. Here we're using delegations, kind of like functions. If you look at it as code, you'll see that it's something. It's just a function. So it's just a function. There's a function called search. Those are the business levels, and there's the implementation inside of it of how do you click something. So this is kind of like when I'm talking about BDD, and also you can write the login before you can decide. Oh, sorry. I wanted this thing and say checkout. I don't know. So you can
add... zoom that window? We're realizing it's going to be slightly too high res for people to see very well.
Oh, let me try to make it a bit bigger. Oh, sorry. I'm trying. I think I add. Can I zoom in here? I want to create another Google. I don't know. Checkout. And I want to zoom in like this so you can see that.
Oh, brilliant, thank you.
Create functionality working. When you write a test, you can work either from the kind of the spec, the business level, and to the test, the implementation, or backwards. As I said, recording is actually, ideally you want to create those steps before go in, whether you record it or code it. This is where of course, that you want to go inside the checkout and create that. So I suggest working, first of all, with the business level, trying to understand that from your analytics, and hopefully AI will help with that and can generate those skeletons automatically for you. But then the implementation should be inside those. I think that one other thing was like you were mentioning, and then in TDD is like, how do I clicking on something? How do I give I say I want to do something when I don't have the implementation yet? So I think that what we will see more and more is that you will give one property away. You'll, just like when you're doing with code right now, you'll just say, oh, I want this to be, I want to click on something that has an ID X. But it doesn't mean that after the test is running, after it works, that you can't improve it and then start using other properties. Because the ID, as I said, someone's going to change that. So you might want to rely on it for the first time, but then after that you won't. And another example would be, and I think hopefully by the end of the year we'll see more examples like this. You can also look at the mocks. Imagine you have a mock. You can find an element based on the way it looks. Like this, literally the pixels. It doesn't have to be a real one. It could be an image. Imagine that you have an image. You say, find an element based on how it looks. This is very flaky. That means that this is going to change so fast. People would do attempts to change the colors and the text, and that would break. But I think that it's enough if it will run once, if it will pass once, then you can learn about all that different property, not just the way it looks externally, the pixels. Look at all the different attributes and learn, and it will not fail again.
Yeah,
I hope I make myself clear.
Oh yeah, it does, and actually that fits very well because one of the sayings I learned with TDD was red, green, refactor, right? So when you get the green, that doesn't mean that you're done. It's you get the green when you've demonstrated that the initial implementation works, and then you can improve things, and at that point you can, now that you have something that works, you can swap in AI detection for explicit selectors. and take over from there. And it means that your test is now more robust. This is, I mean, the great thing about all of this is that if you, those of us who work in dealing with test automation are so used to the majority of breakage or a huge amount of breakage being effectively deliberate, right? Because something was redesigned and or something was just moved to a different point in the page, or the ID was changed, or whatever. And so being able to remove a huge amount of those false positives and make the test more robust is incredibly valuable. So the talking of which, in terms of changing things, we had a couple of questions, actually. Both Johnny Five and Heidi were talking about div tags. Now, div tags still exist. They supposedly, as we're writing more semantic HTML, we should be using div tags less, but that doesn't seem to be happening. Ideally we should be using, I don't know, web components or something where you have the HTML, when you read it, it has semantic meaning. Is this for AI? Well, certainly for your kind of your implementation of AI browser testing, is it able to handle? Firstly, is it able to handle those kinds of changes? So if you switch from a div tag to, say, web component or something, a custom element to describe a component, is that going to be able to handle that?
Yeah. I not only I even want to show, maybe I'll show something like I'll take this book example here. By the way, I had once when Wix originally, when I worked there like a decade ago, we used our framework that we built in-house. But obviously they threw away my code and started using React a couple of years ago. And we had a test that ran on a test with this, like before the change and after the change. The DOM was different, but the test passed, because you can still, if you have several properties that actually that says, oh, in high probability, this is the same element. For example, if it looked different, the DOM, instead of a button, it's div, or vice versa, it's still gonna have the value, for example, book. And so it still can find it. So I think AI actually adds a lot of things in order to how to find. There's things that you don't expect. Like things that we noticed was that, for example, in this case, like when you click on this book, I saw that all the books are actually exactly the same, all the book buttons. It's a reusable component. But what I saw was that in that case, so they all have the same properties as everyone else, but I saw that that the text actually, how do you know that this is unique to this component? But how do you know that to use this component? What happens if you change the toggle with the Flagstaff? What happens if you switch them? What should you click, this one or that one? So the question is, it depends on the way you look at it, and of course, automatically, for example, it would suggest, okay, there's several properties. Either it's the second, we can click the second one, or we can click the one that has Tongli next to it. But you see that more stable, they will see that the text is actually more meaningful.
Oh, interesting.
In just a second. Obviously, those things you want to have it so you can edit it and say, no, I don't want you to use this, or I want to use always the env, I don't know, you can choose a variable user, I don't know, something that go inside of here. But you can change all that. But by default, you want the computer to be actually smarter than you and actually suggest things that you've never thought of.
Ideally, yeah. So is there, I mean, the second point with that is that one of the problems with divs, for example, is that, and losing semantic meaning, is that it's painful for accessibility, in that you lose a lot of the meaning that assistive browsers and devices are able to pick up on. Are there tools, I mean, I'm not sure if testing does this, but how would you recommend for, what would you recommend for ensuring maintaining the accessibility?
Say that again. I'm sorry, like everyone's working from home, including me. And
yeah,
there's
I think
7-week-old baby crying here, but her mom is taking care of her.
Yeah, it sounds like we're interrupting her meeting. Yeah, so I don't want to interrupt her meeting. It sounds like she's complaining about it. So talking about accessibility in particular, are there ways that you can verify that the whatever components you have are when you're changing the implementation, that they're still maintaining or improving the accessibility by ensuring that the semantic meaning of the component is being passed along to assisted devices or assistive browsers that are able to use it. Do you know, and like ways of doing that, or ways of just testing for accessibility generally?
Yeah, I think testing accessibility was probably a bit harder than just looking at the pixels, because looking at the pixels, you say, I don't care if it's the tag is div or span or button. I care about what's the random pixels, because the semantic. Um, Taking the semantic more, you can validate. I think when you do a validation, obviously you can validate that something has a specific property, but also things that you can do, but I don't recommend, is actually saying, you know what, I want to have the threshold to be super high. That means I want to have 100% or 90% of the properties to be aligned. Maybe in the future you could have just more focus on that, like you have must, like the tag button, or you want to have some kind of as you said, for the accessibility, to have more properties there, or special uh, um, accessibility validations that would be added, just like visual validations. There could be accessibility validation, and you'll just add those, or of course would be added automatically after a recording. So I think we can be there. I don't think that we are there right now.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely, that would be a really interesting thing to work on in the future, especially making sure that not just if you can derive the semantics of a component from its behavior, and then validate that it is that those semantics are being effectively communicated in the HTML or in however however it's implemented, that I can imagine would also be very valuable.
I agree.
Yeah. So we've got to wrap it up in just a couple of minutes. I was wondering the a couple more questions for you before we wrap up. The first one, the are there kind of techniques or technologies that you see web developers and especially test automation people? Well, actually, no. Let's focus on web developers generally. Techniques or technologies that you really wish they would use more, other than obviously AI-driven test automation. We can see what else would do you think would give them value if they used it more or were more aware of it?
Techniques and technology. So techniques always have higher level of abstraction. At least one level. You can go in and you can go inside, and but you should always separate between the business logic and implementation. I've said that, and I'll repeat that because I think it's critical. And that's, of course, the thing that this helps is, of course, is reusability, because this can be copy paste to another test, and of course passed in different parameters. But I think it's critical.
Yeah, and there's many layers of doing that.
Yes.
Throughout the app.
And technology-wise, I think we're there. Like if you're talking about front-end testing, web developers, front-end testers can write more unit tests right now, as opposed to I see, from what I see, and again, I met only a few thousand, I think, over the last few years, um, is that in the back end, everyone's doing unit tests. Everyone's
Right.
doing unit tests. On the front
Yeah.
end, almost nobody does unit tests. And
Ah.
there's no reason. There's like right now Angular, React, Ember.js, Vue.js, like everyone has like beautiful building frameworks to write unit tests, but they're not doing that. I suspect it's more educational than technology, maybe, because the technology now is available. But I think this is something that I recommend people doing that. You don't have to be religious. You don't have to be TDD, but I think it will help you write more tests. The test would help you create a more reusable. Their code will be more reusability, etc.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I mean, especially given there's over the past couple of years, design systems have become so much more popular, especially things like Storybook. And Storybook has fantastic built-in stuff for running unit tests or components.
Visual validation as well.
Yeah, and it would be, it fits right into the existing component flow. So unfortunately, we're going to wrap it up there. I saw that we've got another question come in that maybe if you want to handle it in the chat later, or we can discuss it later, which is to do with Cucumber and the ups and downs of using Cucumber. Actually, I'll tell you what. Do you want to do 1 minute on what you like? Actually, what you like about Cucumber and BDD?
What I like about Cucumber is it forces you. You can't write a test without creating the higher level. They said the test starts with the spec. The whole idea, I guess, was something that nobody, but most people don't know. Cucumber wasn't designed just for test automation. It was designed as a tool for product people. So all the product, everyone can look at the spec level, and they want it to be tied, of course, to your code. But what in the real implementation, this is a documentation, and actually this is the spec, not just documentation that you can change documentation, and it doesn't relate to the code. Like we all had it, that you had beautiful documentations, but then you change the code and the docs documentation is not updated. This kind of forces you to work where you have it's a documentation, but you can't change that. It's rigid. In fact, that if you change it, there's the test won't run. So you have to you have to change it. It's and it forces you to separate those between the business logic and implementation. That's what I love about it. I do believe there's two things that they don't force you, but there's the give and when. Again, this is depending on how strict or religious are you. It doesn't have to be that way. Like whether you can call it login doesn't mean that you have to call it given when I log in. Those are nice tips, but people should take, just like religion, they should take it as they want and not being forced to be in a specific way, and actually take it gradually more and more and get some of the values.
Brilliant. Thank you. So we're gonna just wrap up and so thank you, Oren, for this. This has been fantastically helpful. Oren is the CEO and founder of Testim, Testim.io, which he has been using, and I will switch to that view again during this to demo, since we got several questions asking what tool you're using. I noticed that especially one thing that was incredibly useful is the new free playground for Playwright and Puppeteer users. So if you want to show that off, which is something that everybody can use for free, I believe.
Yes, I can. It's not this one. That's the spec one, the actual product. There's two released we released. First of all, this product that I demoed here with the recorder that we tested, that's also, we released that as there's a freemium. And also what we released this week was you can record, you can go in and record a scenario and export that directly automatically. Just move it a bit so you can see. You can record the steps and get them at different as code. And you just copy paste or just click it directly when someone wants to. We want to do more, like I want to show everything. I'll send the URLs, like also for Puppeteer. Selenium is coming up next. I want you to show and play around with all the different things and see the difference between the different frameworks. Those are the more of the what I call the underlying infrastructure frameworks. So this is a completely free tool that we released.
That's brilliant. Okay. Thank you so much for joining us, Oren. And for people who are just tuning in or may have missed part of this, we will be putting the recording and the transcription online in the next couple of weeks. And we will also be back next week. And I can't remember who's Estelle. Is it Sleuth? I'll be talking to somebody from Sleuth next week. So thank you very much, Oren, for joining us. Thank you, everybody who tuned in, and see you all next week.
It was a pleasure being here. Thank you, everyone. See you next week.
Thank you. Bye-bye.